Cool.
Hello and welcome to the Geek on My Sleeve channel. Today's a little funky, so why don't you get weird with us? And what I mean by that is technical difficulties across the board, but we said we'll be here and we're going to be here. So Carl is not a floating head, he is just a disembodied voice. So yeah.
I'm going to be Futin for this episode.
Ah,
Uh,
yes.
I don't have my visual orb engaged, so I am just the voice that gives guidance and has a fragmented memory. So yes, I will play as Futin, and Pete, you can be Scion.
Oh, wow. I guess he goes through everything with him. Yeah, we can play Scion.
All right, all right.
Anyway, where we do spoiler-free book reviews, summary recaps, live book discussions. So like today, The Land is a favorite by far. I would hand this to anyone and be like, check this out. A lot of good feels.
Yes.
Um, so I guess what the book that we are doing is The Land Founding Chaos Seed Book 1, a lit RPG saga by Aleron Kong. It is narrated by Nick Podell. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
Yes. Yes. All-time favorite. Love how the series starts out. There is some controversy and mixed feelings later on in the series, at least as far as the lit RPG community goes. But yeah, it's definitely one of my top favorite series. Highly recommended to anybody interested in the genre. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think. I believe this was the second lit RPG series I ever picked up. The first one for me was Divine Dungeon, which loved it, but I think there was only two books out at the time. Where for The Land, there was at least four, maybe five. And help me out here if I'm misremembering, Pete, because we both flew through the those series about the same time.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember there being a handful already out, but he releases them pretty quick. I think first book was 2017, and we're up
yeah,
to 8 in 2020, so that's way more than one a year. So,
yeah, yeah, putting them out really quick. Haven't gotten around to listening to book 8 yet. I'm a bit anxious because there's been some controversy. Seems that
I,
book 8 isn't his best book. But yeah, looking forward to getting into it.
I don't know. Not that we're going to talk about it, but the way 7 ended, it definitely was I feel like it was a positioning move or a shifting,
Mm,
and there were a
okay.
lot of foreshadowing or events that kind of foretold potential.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so enjoying the series. It's not over. He's very quick on releases, so that's
Yes.
nice. Book 7 also was absolutely phenomenal. Was the longest out of all of them, and
Yeah.
encompassed just so much that it's kind of hard to do that again. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where he always achieves a lot with each book, but there is a variance in, I guess, page count and audio length.
Yeah. Speaking of which, for this one, we're just talking about book one,
Yeah.
and I forgot how short book one is. Like a lot happens. I feel like it's a really dense book where so much goes on. Um, Yet it doesn't even clear 10 hours where book 7 is over 40 hours. So literally four times as big.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah. Uh,
Thank you, Fun Guy Elite. Definitely getting the vibe in 7 that it's going to be a future internal struggle. Yeah, it's there. So, sorry, we're getting a little distracted. The series as a whole, there is a lot that happens,
Mhm.
and I feel like we end up almost juggling too many things.
Mhm.
And yeah, I haven't seen all of them come to fruition. There's one thing to foreshadow, and there's
Yeah.
another thing to use your shadow form. So yeah.
Uh, it's a difficult line to walk. As a reader, if an author makes promises, I want those to be fulfilled, right? Yet if I switch and put on a different hat, how many MMOs, which lit RPGs pretty much are based themselves off of, like MMOs, RPG, video game feels. How many MMOs have you started quests or started chains or go and explore territories, yet you don't complete it?
Oh yeah, because my quest log's full.
Yeah, right, right.
And that's where this series, and again, try to keep this high level for the general stuff. It is very, I guess, real world esque, where
Mhm,
it there's a lot of, I guess, morals and values that come from it. There's,
mhm,
a lot of graphic detail, so you feel like you're there, and it just like encompasses, all of it. Waking up, eating, sleeping. I don't think they really cover pooping, but
uh,
it encompasses, all of life. Where a lot of the others, it's like I don't need to eat because it's a game, or
yeah, yeah,
a lot of other, day to day stuff.
mhm,
Anyway,
yeah.
so
Let's get into the intro a little bit there because I have some comments, but I feel it'd be worth it to, kinda set up the book, right?
or yeah,
Oh,
they talk
fungi leaks,
about
got
the
bathing, everything
bathing.
in there. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if
Yeah,
that happens in book 1.
no, not one,
Uh,
but we've been grouping in the whole series.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. We're going to do our best to not talk about those other books, but yes, all of real life um, tasks, side quests, skills, and abilities are involved in this one. So the prologue really sets up the scale and scope of this book, right?
yeah,
It's not just simple adventure questing through. We get introduced to the light and the dark court and pretty much learn about these deities. And I really enjoyed how he explained it and set that up. Um, Talked about how you know, how strong and powerful these deities are and how they'd be gods in any other realm, but they're locked away, right?
yeah.
And oh, go ahead.
And the other thing that was kind of exciting is if you've ever seen Men in Black, and there's that marble that's on the kitten's collar that is its whole world inside itself. That's kind of what
Hmm.
it made me think of, where
Yeah.
these would be these epic monstrosities, but due to the land and all the powers encompassing throughout it, it's a
Hmm.
lock. So, I mean, you got to destroy a whole world to free yourself.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I guess, side note, there's a lot of books that do this where, like, at the beginning of a chapter or beginning of a book, they have like a prologue that's completely irrelevant or that doesn't come to fruition. For me, I really like the Ascend Online series, but it didn't do amazing. Like, for that, you had, creativity and destruction,
Hmm.
but it was just glimpsed at and it didn't really come together. Granted, there's only 3 in it,
I was about
but
to say we're still pretty early in Ascend Online versus the Land where we have 8 books now, and I think
yeah.
some of the foreshadowing and stuff that you're talking about with the prologue, we don't get a whole lot more in book 1, right? That's later on.
Yeah. But I just the whole concept of it. And then if you take Mistborn series, Like we just re-listened to the first book because it's going to be next weekend,
Mhm.
and that it just like all encompasses it in the first book. You know, there's a little blurb every chapter, and you're
Mhm.
kind of like, what is this? Who is this? What's going on here? And then you hit a point, and it gets, you know, explained, and then
Yes.
it reflects and it goes at a whole different light. And then, even though now you have a point of reference, it just gets completely flipped on its head again. And it's like, well, it turns out you were trying to read a shirt through a mirror that was backwards. Anyway, so Brandon does an amazing job. A lot of interesting stuff, but yeah, haven't seen a whole lot with it. So, sorry, getting in off. Back to book one. We've got the light and dark court, and
Mhm.
then we know the land is the lock. We also know, or we find out in the very beginning, that the land that everyone is playing as their VR MMO RPG thingy
Mhm.
is not it's not connected, and that's where select ones like we just did Dungeon Lord, that is the same world,
Right.
but for the land, it's not. It's the Dark Court modeled the game after the land, but they're not directly connected
Mhm.
because the abilities, the powers are relevant but not exact.
Mhm.
And yeah, yeah. So that was another thing that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, when you think about it, like, as much as we talk about how this, for a lot of people, is used as an example for lit RPG genre, there's one of the, ways that it kinda deviates, right? Because he's not really trapped in a video game, like Sword Art Online.
Yeah,
He is pretty much transported, Bryce Heard had witnessed, into another world that is modeled off of the game that he played as Silk, where he was like the top 100 players of the world and whatnot, or of the VR area. And then by doing that inside the game, he pretty much thrice heard a witness and then gets portal to another world that is pretty much mirrored off of the video game, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to really point out too about the prologue that I found was very interesting is the series itself is called Chaos Seeds, right? And
For the
you know,
intro, it talks about how whenever you get enough humans together, there's always destruction, and they just yeah,
yeah, yeah, and I thought that it did a really good job just kind of articulating that, like humans, they have so much potential for good, yet so much potential for evil, yet at the end of the day, like they are these seeds of chaos energy. And I just thought that he did a really good job kind of explaining that and setting that up. And that's a big theme that we follow throughout the whole book, right?
yeah.
Of the different chaos seeds. And it alludes to it in the first book that there are other chaos seeds out there.
Or yeah,
We
I
get
guess it's for the series, not the book.
So, and then Zekreets, am I saying that right? The imp.
I thought it was free. I don't know.
And
Or Zetrix.
Zetrix, the imp. That interaction there in the beginning is a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Um,
and that just the raw emotions there, because
yes.
he wakes up, and from the beginning, I just had a chuckle where he's like, "Oh man, the sun, driving ice picks through my eyes," and he's like, "Wait a minute, I'm better than this. Fire picks, yeah." And
Yeah.
then anyway, so he gets to Zetrix, and he's like, "Whoa, this is really interactive. I'm still in the game." And he's checking it out, and he just kicks him right in the eye. Just yeah,
Yes.
whole
Yes.
interaction.
And the extremes he goes to really get it through Richter's head that this is not a game, and that he is a noob, and just
Yeah,
all the smack that the imp throws down. Um, and everything in that beginning. I really enjoy Aleron Kong's humor. It's not the same punny dad jokes that you get from Dakota Kraut's Divine Dungeon, but Aleron Kong kind of has his own flavor there on the humor. That's a lot of fun. Um, and then all the little references. I think it's within the first couple of chapters. Yeah, there you go. Get the kitty up there. What does the fox say?
Yep.
Ring ding 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 ding. After he slays the fox and everything.
And
Um,
that's I mentioned it in the spoiler free, but that's something Aleron Kong does a great job about. Like, he ties it all together between like real world possible events and things
hmm
that happen. Because when he kills the
hmm
fox, he's like, "Whoa, this is more realistic," and he's talking about how the blood is warm and
Right.
how he shot it and it was slower because it was limping away, and just like you get the realism, and then you
hmm
get the comic relief, and yeah, it
And I feel like in the first book he does a good job balancing that out, right?
yeah.
Like so there were some periods where reading some other lit RPG books where it's just like okay, like the puns and the humor, like I enjoy it, but it's just over the top at times. Where here along that emotional roller coaster as you're kind of going through the struggle with Richter as he's coming to terms with the fact that he may not see everyone he knows and loves because he's transported to this other world and this is his new life. And just the struggle and the challenges and the physical pain that he goes through as he's fighting for his life and later getting jumping ahead a little bit his first death, going through all that and everything he sees, and then he brings it back with the humor, right?
Yeah.
um, every whether wherever we are on that in that emotional roller coaster, he manages to bring it back a little bit with humor. So thanks, Emma. We think Peter's kitty is pretty cute too. um, and that's one of the more the better. um,
Yeah, it's got multiple points of contact. It's not just on one, because a lot of them, like if you get something near it, it will like jump off. But this one is
mhm, pretty
pretty
good.
good. Yeah.
So after the imp and everything, I mean, Richter really gets set up in this book, right? If you're
Or
going to
yeah,
get
we get
thrown,
the two abilities.
yeah, he starts off with the limitless ability and the gift of tongues. Why don't you break those down a bit for us? Because uh, go
So
ahead.
Dietrich explains in the world you have innate ability or innate talent, which essentially saying like, hey, if you're dexterous or you're a dancer, you'll have a higher capacity to do dexterous or whatever stuff.
hmm
Limitless essentially says you're going to be good at whatever you try. And
hmm
typically, when you advance in a certain skill set, you it's like a currency almost. You use up your reserve to advance, and then once you reach a threshold, then you're no longer able to advance. So he gets set up with an amazing limitless ability. It definitely gave me the feel of this is going to be a long game,
hmm
because even though he can learn everything, if you die and can't do anything, then it doesn't mean anything. So limitless, yeah, he's able to excel at anything he does, and then gift of tongues really pulls through and helps us out for our very first interaction. Um,
Yes.
and there's a lot more to it. It's not in book one, but for book one, it helps him out. Which so he's talked to Zetrix, he saw his abilities, thrice heard and witnessed for the second time. Now he owes Zetrix a favor
hmm
and killed the wolf or the fox, and then he starts hearing. I think he says it sounds like a bird song, and then he's like, "Wait a minute, am I being punked here? They're talking about taking me out."
That's another point that I really put in Aleron Kong's favor. He does a good job with the subtle descriptions, right? So many authors, you really, you'll get a bit of the physical stuff, but he always kind of talks about the different races and kind of how the voices, how they sound, right? Like later on, talking about the different elves and like how the wood elves sound. I think it's more like maybe
Or
like
woodwind, or like
y-
flute.
yeah, yeah, where the other were more something else. I forget what it is, but it kind of helps you. If you were reading it, which we didn't read it, we listened to it. You can go watch the spoiler-free review to hear Peter gush about how amazing Nick Podell is at doing the audiobook narration. Phenomenal.
Yes.
But yeah, so he comes up on the sprites and
And
go ahead.
gets taken to the Hearth Mother. Yet again, sorry if you haven't already picked this up, gushing a little more about it. The very beginning of the audiobook, he says, "Hey, I couldn't be where I am today without people supporting me. I love you, Mom." And I forget her name, but the name is the same as the Hearth Mother, or at least the middle
Hmm.
name is the same
Yeah.
as the Hearth Mother. So that's where she throughout the series you can definitely tell she's a motherly figure, and you can kind of
Hmm.
tell throughout this. There's a moment where they come back and she's explaining stuff, and Richter's kind of giving her lip, like, okay, everybody's out to get me. I'm awesome, whatever. And she, signals for him to kneel down, and she, whops him upside the head, and it's like nobody likes crybaby or something.
Yeah. 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 She, even though him and Scion kind of have a rocky start, um, as Scion and Richter's relationship grows and their bromance develops, she kind of adopts him in a way, right? Not your typical mentor, old man in the village type of deal, but she does her part in a more motherly sort of way.
Yeah, and
E-
definitely leads into some
mhm.
foreshadowing or potential where she's like, "Oh, I don't see, or I see little good in you, but I also don't see any bad, your
Right.
chaos," which she doesn't know, but the ability or potential to be anything.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's kind of driving that home again. And so, like any other MMO, we get our very first typical kill quest. Hey, go kill 5 wolves. And you're like, okay, okay, I'm getting this lit RPG feel.
Yeah.
And Scion goes with
Feels
him.
familiar.
Yeah.
Been here
And
before.
then, yeah, he just lets him die. He's like, this isn't my job.
Mhm.
And, oh man, I have this clip that I don't know if I have everything set up for. And this is another technical difficulty scenario where I was trying to break things. Um,
It's what we do.
so real. Oh, buttons. See if this works.
Pressing
There was nothing graceful or dignified
buttons.
about it. His body was immobilized by great, racking sobs. They had been tearing at him. They had torn off a piece of his chest before he died. He had seen that damn wolf had been chewing on a piece of him. The horror of it washed over Richter. He relived the cold feeling he had experienced at the moment of his death. He drowned in the memory of helplessness as the wolf's teeth had torn and ripped at his tender flesh. The horrors hammered at his psyche. His mental torture physically manifested in his inability to leave the fetal position. As soon as he came to the end of his nightmarish remembrance, the sequence started again from the beginning. He relived the experience over and over, not able to break free of the hellish loop. As his mind continued to torture him, however, another emotion rose. As he thought about the experience and the pain, he began to feel something else besides horror. It started as the kernel of a feeling, barely noticeable, inconsequential even, but it grew. After a while, he recognized the emotion. He felt anger. No, that wasn't the right word. He felt rage. He raged at the wolves for hurting him. He raged at
Yeah.
Scion for not helping him.
I
More though,
turned
he
on.
raged at
I can
himself for
hear
being
it.
helpless and afraid. Not just in the past moments or the past day, but instead at feeling just a bit afraid his entire life, of not having any true control over his life's direction, and instead bowing time and again to the demands of society, the demands of his family, or the ridiculous demands he made of himself fueled by reality TV and pop culture. He felt the need to take control of his own life, to face any issue head on and no longer escape. He felt the need for power. Richter broke the loop of pain he had been reliving and stood, a fierce determination in his eyes. This was not about denying that something horrible had happened. That would have been just another form of escape. This was about accepting the realities of his life, and despite the numerous blows of fate, standing tall. You have proven yourself to be resolute. The choices in your life led you to a critical point. A nexus of opportunities were laid before you, many leading to disaster. You have chosen a finer path. The experiences of your entire life have culminated in this one moment. You have decided not to kneel, but to stand. Not to beg, but to take. Not to wait, but to forge ahead. Be true to yourself to find your specific power. Bonus to mental resistance, 5%. Bonus to spiritual resistance, 5%. Staring at the message across his field of view, he blinked in surprise. He had not expected the universe to reward him for his own personal journey, but he would take it.
Anyway, yeah, so, sorry, I guess that's one thing I have a problem with. I listen to things at 2x on a regular basis, and if you're not ready for it, or if you don't gradually increase it and kind of train yourself for it, it takes a little bit to connect.
I was listening to it, and I didn't want to talk over the sound clip, but yes, there's a taste of what Pete listens to on a regular basis. In the future, we will
Slow
scale it
down.
back to 1x speed.
Yeah, so anyway, that side note, off track, that is just like such an empowering and moving thing. That's after his first death, and this is where it does good because it's so relatable. It goes and he died in the game, and for most games it's a disconnect. It's like, okay, whatever, respawn, fix my gear, do this, that, the other. But for this, like, he's emotionally distraught. Like, he just died. Like, he had to live through it, and that was so much for him to take on. But then he just loops it back around to, pop culture and the demands of society and everything else going on. And yeah, the fact that through him being resolute, he's explains a lot. He, the world gave him resistances, which I'm not going to say there's a direct translation, but you can tell when, I guess, stressful events or impact people differently. And there are some people who deal with it well because they've come to terms with it, and the world has figured out their resistances or buffed their resistance. And so, I don't know.
It's such a fun book for the geek and the MMO gamer nerd in me, but there is so many good lessons and takeaways from this book, right? As Richter goes through all these challenges and struggles, overcomes it, and then, we haven't even gotten to the application of power, right?
We kind of glanced over it because I was a part of Zetrix, and then it comes again later. But Zetrix explains that it's not about the level, or it's not about how strong you are. It's about the application of power. And then we get to see it again when he gets his grease spell, and he relives a earlier raid where he had a mage who used an ice spell, which made someone or the mob or boss trip, which then allowed him to get a critical strike from being prone. So it's and we see it come through time and time again. Like, I guess skipping forward a little bit, or so. Yes, application of power. He becomes resolute. He goes back to the hearth tree, smacks Scion a good one, and then the Hearth Mother comes through again. We get a little bit of insight into the rebirth, where she says, "Hey, you can come back, but you may lose your soul." And then, as all quest chains go, we get our second link in the chest coin, or the link in the quest chain. There we go. Words. And then we're off to kill the wolves, figure out what the problem is, which, yet again, application of power, we find the goblins, and due to Richter wanting to learn the herbalism skill, he has a, insight to where, hey, can we poison them because there's a lot of goblins. Okay, anyway, to where I need to be. Application of power, they end up poisoning the cooking pot or the main stew of the goblin, which allows them to take a vaster number and, yeah, essentially wins the day.
Yeah, yeah. The point I was going to make is I think maybe this isn't targeted quite towards a younger audience, but just again, the lessons and the takeaways. We're not out there um, slaying goblins per se and completing massive quest chains in real life, yet there's so many other good takeaways from this book, right? Like application of power and just
Or for me, I guess when you say that, instead of saying application of power, it's work smart, not hard, or work
hmm
smarter, not harder. That would be
hmm
my, great life lesson for everyone, because anyone can do the same old rote, follow the path,
yep, yep.
set in stone method, but it takes, you know, time, dedication, other things. Oh wow, that one's a little funky. And you have to, you know, actually think through it.
hmm
But yeah.
Yep.
So
Creative problem solving skills.
yeah,
We
yeah,
definitely get to see a lot of that from Richter and Scion.
yeah. Yep.
Um, but yeah, so again, I really enjoy the book series, but if I have like one major complaint is Richter it just starts out so overpowered in a way and really just um, a lot of stuff just falls into his lap from the get-go, right? First quest chain.
I don't know. The first question, due to it's one of those forward backwards things. Like gift of tongues, I feel is inherent in most MMOs, and it's probably something that we take
Okay,
for granted because
okay,
wherever you start, you can talk to all the different forms, or they're all speaking common or whatnot.
yeah,
Um, and he does die. A lot of it was so that he can
yeah.
become resolute and that he can come to terms with everything. But the fact that, yeah, I don't know.
Come on, come on. He's not even like level 5 though, and he inherits a place of power and gets his own mist village. I mean, you don't think that's a little just
Okay,
like lucking out
is. I feel that he gets set
first
up
quest
way
chain?
too much,
I
but at
mean,
the same time, you got to think he's level like 24 and he's starting out level 1. And then I guess we do find out later that people, the only way they get XP is through doing
combat
uh, or well, yeah, combat, or
or
all the people
social
in the
quests.
town do crafting type quests or whatnot.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, okay. He does get set up, but
Not to
he's
mention that
not
pool
a
with the
100%.
clarity and whatnot.
Yeah, which I guess I kind of took for granted too, because in most MMOs, there's always like a catch up mechanic, or there's maximizing your buffs.
hmm
So I felt like that was more of a lit RPG aspect, and I guess that does kind of diverge it from the realism of other stuff. But yeah, okay,
Well,
he gets set up.
maybe we'll throw up a poll later, but for those who have read it, feel free to throw it in the chat on the side or the comments below now and or later. Do you think that Richter got set up too much? Or do you think that he really starts off overpowered or just enough? Or not at all? I don't know. Pete seems to think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you don't think he got too set up or overpowered, where I feel he closer on the overpowered slash. Granted, he did have, a higher being, higher the imp to kind of get him, going in the right direction, right? And he clearly got placed in that grove. So like there are some higher beings kind of rooting for him, but yeah, I don't know. Really enjoy the
So
first
yeah,
book. I think he's just a little too OP and a little too set up for me to be like, is there struggle there? I don't know. Anyway, so Mist Village is founded, Futon is summoned, We get some good laughs from Futon, and really makes you wonder: is he intentionally messing with Richter? Like he's monotone, just um, kind of the butler or steward
Or
of the Mist
he
Village,
he
right?
is the guppy of
Yes.
he's Bobaverse, another great series. Similar kind of component where it's an assistant, but
Hmm.
yeah, he's the guppy of the Mist Village where he has information. He's a little more decked out than a guppy, but then he's also got other physical restrictions. But that's a whole separate line. Also, I guess another key point there, we find the staff that Scion has a innate hatred or uh,
Negative reaction too.
yeah, negative reaction to.
Yeah. Um, which we learn more about later. I mean, we can go ahead and jump to it, but before, I think even the Hearth Mother said even before her time, which she's old, like she's the oldest of the old of all the sprites, right? Before her time, the pixies, kind of the mirror image or the
A second part
how
of their soul.
yeah, that's how they describe it. Like
Or
this.
I think they say goblins are inherently against because they typically have a negative alignment where sprites have a positive alignment, and
Hmm.
then pixies are the opposite of that where it is the other half of their soul. Each
Hmm.
each what is Scion again? Each sprite
Sprite.
has half of a destiny, and pixies are the
Mm,
other half of their destiny.
yes, yes. So Richter leaves it in her care. Um, and who knows? I mean, we know, but it might be foreshadowing for later down the line. This book does a really good job at setting up all these other potential storylines, right?
Yeah,
Um,
because
so yeah. Um, all in all, again, Richter lucks out, comes into the staff, all this other stuff, really just ranking up his reputation with the sprites, which is good because now they're going to be his neighbors slash allies for the Mist Village. And we get to see a bit of the world, or not world building, kind of like village building mechanics there, which in other series that we've covered before, Life Reset, need to check to see if there's an update on when book 4 is going to be out on Audible.
yeah.
But that has some really epic village building mechanics in there. Mist
Well,
Village, not quite on that level.
or well, yeah, not on that level, but that's one thing that I enjoy about this because it's kind of like the difference between Sword Art Online, which is an anime, versus Log Horizon, also an anime. Um, Sword Art Online is very much the solo play where it's all
Right.
about him and it's all about min maxing and being epic. Where Log
Hmm.
Horizon is about building a community and having a
Hmm.
guild and doing everything.
Right.
I there are sorry, so continue the series. There are select books that dive deep into solo aspect. There's select books that dive deep into the group guild combat aspects, and then there's
Hmm.
select books that dive deep into civilization progression and the town. I think it could. I don't know. It's hard to bounce between everything, but at the
Yeah.
same time, there's a lot. I guess a better one to relate it if we were talking books. Um, brain. Okay, lost the book I was trying to reference. Anyway, so
He does a good job trying to do it all. Again, not trying to get too far into the other books in the series, but yeah, I would agree with you in the anime analogy that he comes kind of somewhat down the middle between those two, between the Sword Art and the Log Horizon bit. But I almost feel like he tries to do too much of it all in this series.
Yeah, and
But
that's where I enjoyed it, but I too many promises.
yeah, back to the founding.
Yeah,
So we ranked up our reputation with the Hearth Mother. Um, we go
save the
back,
pixie.
yep, save the pixie, go back to the village, see that Futon is handling the village pretty well in his absence. And it's pretty early on, but we get like our first dungeon crawl, which was a lot of fun. It was pretty much Scion, him, and Futon, and through that we get to learn a little bit more about the Mist Village and Futon's kind of limitations and characteristics there, and humor. At some point, I think he decides that he wants to turn Futon pink, um, and or attach a bunch of bells to him, which that banter back and forth is quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I think we
Um,
also have the scene where Scion's like slapping him to wake him up. He's
mm,
like, "Oh, you sure have a habit of jumping on enemies' backs," and he's like, "Oh, well, you have a habit of laying under enemies, and that's not the way to find love." So it's a lot of bromance going on there.
yes, yes.
And then we get even more supercharged, and not only can we learn any skill or ability at 100% capacity, we now learn any skill or ability 30% faster because we do the mini dungeon dive and we unlock
Yeah,
air magic, and
yeah.
then we also progress our um, Scion's relationship by being able to unlock haste or
Hmm.
air magic with Scion. We get that whole. I get for me, there was a lot. It was
You,
very,
you still don't feel he's overpowered at this point? I mean,
but
the
these are all just. It's not like he got the Kamehameha. He can't one shot everything. He just
uh,
has a he. Okay, he is set up, but it's a long game, and that's
yeah,
where
yeah.
it's not too much because, like, I guess skipping forward, when we save the elf and we're leaving Dreamsicle's guy's house,
Hmm.
uh, the Nightblade, Rowan, or whatever, the leader of the Nightblade that they just ransacked,
Hmm.
he, as a profession, is way higher
Hmm.
and, destroys one of the other members. And if we had to face that guy, we would have been done for. Like, even though
Yes.
he does have a lot of multiplier factors, like, and in the long game, he will be able to progress even further faster,
Hmm.
but it's not like he can one shot everything kind of deal. So, yes, he got set up. Yes, there's a lot of potential, but it's not. I don't know. It's kind of like a passive thing for me. And I guess, like I was saying earlier, I took a lot of the things for granted because they are inherent in MMOs.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Um, so the dungeon crawl was a lot of fun. For the sake of time, won't get too into that. Um, does acquire the ice staff, which he uses to barter later when he gets to the village. Um, they pretty much get all set up, and we get to see more of the world, which we talked about in the spoiler-free review. As short as this book is, it does a really good job with the world building. Right? We start out in the forest. We experience one of the other factions, the sprites. We get his mist village set up, and then we get to go to trying to remember later on in the series, but one of the major human capitals, right? Um,
yeah, and I'm horrible with names.
yeah, the main capital is Law, but they first go to Leaf Crossing, and it's we get to follow them along that journey. Like the first three-fourths of the book, I think like you get every day play by play. And there's stuff
Yeah,
that happens,
and that's
right?
something he does well with like his time hops. There are time hops, but it's almost irrelevant information. And yet again, I
Hmm.
probably just took it for granted because for me, it's kind of like playing Skyrim. You know, if I've been there, I can fast travel there. And so
Hmm.
when he's like, "Hey, so we're done at the Mist Village, and we're gonna go over to the Hearth Mother's place or whatever its name
Hmm.
is," it's like, okay, and now we're over there. Oh wow, that's kind of funky. Heads
Uh,
for eyes. Um,
oh, creepy. Make it stop.
yeah.
Uh,
Um,
um,
so there's a couple time hops, but it's not too grand. Um, I understand now why the character the chapters are titles as they are, but
mhm,
first playthrough, I was like, okay, I don't care what day of the month it is here,
right.
and it took me a minute to figure out like, okay, that's a month.
Hmm.
Anyway, so it's relevant and it's something you can use to cite for future events, but I don't know, the titling was kind of a cop out for me.
Yeah, yeah. It helps though, for just keeping track of it all. Um, the journey to Leaf's Crossing is interesting.
Oh yeah, I guess we
Scion
do quite a bit
and
there.
yeah, Scion and Richter are still trying to figure out their relationship a bit. Um, over 9,000, huh?
Yeah, I guess he is
Uh,
a little overpowered.
uh, um, but we get to see the troll. I really enjoyed the interaction there when Scion pretty much like says that, oh, I need to do something real quick, whips up this alchemy thing, puts it on the bark, and then, lures Richter over to this tree. And, just as he's explaining it all, and as it slowly dawns on Richter, like, so you mean, this big scary thing that you just got done describing to me as we're standing outside this tree, um, it's going to come
Oh,
charging out now. Um, and yeah, it's just like, I don't know,
yeah, that was another great, um, yeah,
comedic
just
moment.
yeah, and yet again, like I just enjoy it so much because it hits all the feels for me because it's got that romance, like poking fun at each other, and then it's got the real world where Richter talks about, a relationship is built off of communication, and if
Hmm.
this was kind of a problematic moment. And
Hmm.
then it's got the introspective running for my life, moment where he's like, and for my first part of my plan, I cast haste. And for my second part, I GTFO. It's got the comedic feels for while he's running for his life, and then it's got it hits a lot of big points for me that was
Yeah,
just beautifully.
yeah, good lessons from the book.
And then the
Oh,
contrast, like when they find the seed core that you could have
mhm.
called a mystical booty scratcher.
uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. The subtleties there. Lessons on communication, lessons on friendship, um, you know, outlook on life, et cetera, et cetera. Not
Depending
things,
on your perspective, this is the easy part.
yeah, like not what you typically expect from a video game book, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I expect to just pick this up and have fun slashing, hacking, ranking up, and acquiring loot, right? We get all that, but there was so much more in this book that my first time reading it, I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I enjoy about it. Kind of jumping ahead there, for the sake of time, they get to Leaves Crossing, and we learn about how the new king has slowly been taking away rights from the non-humans, right? And we talked a bit about this, but one of the things that I really enjoy from sci-fi fantasy books is they're able to take these, you know, everyday challenges or issues and kind of put it into like a fantasy or sci-fi realm, and have the characters deal with that. And it's a good way to kind of give readers perspective on things without talking about sensitive subjects, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and I've mentioned it before, but very much the same feel. And biggest thing for me is when you're in a situation, there's typically a knee jerk or a gut reaction, judge a book by its cover kind of moment. And so much of, those interactions are reactionary where you have to
mhm,
do something, but to be able to separate it and to see it abstractly or from a third person perspective
mhm,
can really, you know, the story leads you along explaining and giving you the feels, but then you're also kind of, or at least I'm ADD all over the place where I'm thinking of other implications of it.
yeah. And yeah, and we get to see some of those issues like the racial issue with the kingdom like oppressing non-humans and forcing them to be bonded to humans. And you kind of get to see, for lack of a better words, like the situations and their experiences, and it humanizes them, right? And you get to see where Richter falls, um, on the I'm trying to think of the right verbiage here. Just the
The
choices he
moral
makes.
compass of the character.
Yeah, there you go. We get to see his moral compass very much so in this first book. And later on, when he's talking to Tarad, who becomes his companion, he talks about how ruthless his actions were and how, not everyone would be able to end a man's life when he's down, on his knees or whatever. And he's pretty much like, hey, we gave him every opportunity to help us and make the right call. Um, but anybody that's going to pretty much enslave others and hurt others, they're standing on the wrong side of my book. And he reflects back to when he was, um, living on Earth and not the land. He talks about how commonplace these atrocities.
Atrocities.
Yeah, like every day, and how desensitized people get to them, like the corruption, the evil, the things that are happening to people. He's like, here I'm choosing not to just stand by, like I'm choosing to take a stand,
And that
um,
was one of
and
those
fight for what's right.
weird moments for me because on one hand I was like, wow, this is so relatable. Like there are atrocities going on all over the world and nobody does jack. But then there was that disconnect where I was like, this dude is totally telling you he's either a time traveler or an alien or ported from
Yeah,
another world, and you're just like,
yeah,
yeah, so he did that thing there.
yeah.
So I
Tarad's reaction kind of was kind of a head scratcher, like, if somebody just told me that, yeah, I'd have more
so
questions.
I enjoyed it, but looking back on it, I was just kind of like, no one bats an eye. Kind of same thing with the Hearth Mother at the beginning. He's
Mm.
like ATL Georgia Shorty or something, and she
Yeah.
just gives him a blank stare, and he has that like, well, it's nothing like having a 4 foot tall Celtic druid throw you off your game.
Uh,
So it's yeah,
yeah. It kind of helped with the immersion for me. The reminder that it's not just another adventurer questing through the land. He has been ported from the real world into the land in all its complexity and glory. Um,
but
but yeah,
also it kind of gave me the feel that there's like other powers at place where you
hmm
know we get the blueberry smirk moment where he's eats the blueberries and he gets increased concentration, and he tries
Oh,
to eat another one and he's like, oh dang, it doesn't stack. Anyway, so
uh,
side note, he's like, oh, I wonder what increased concentration feels like, and he's like, oh well, I'm sure any of my ex-girlfriends would be able to tell me, but they're in another world, so I don't care. Goes on.
uh, yeah, yeah.
And then with the seed core where he gets that under the willow tree rainstorm
Mm-hmm,
moment, but then it's just like a fleeting memory.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we got to
Connected
Leaves.
with nature.
Yeah, we get to Leaves Crossing. We get to the inn, or I think we talked to Calder, right?
Yeah,
And they're
that
shaking
whole,
down Scion.
yeah.
Um, the smirk with the DMV and how they managed to get by it all, and then
Mm-hmm,
Richter's quick wit and how he um, kind of blackmails, kind of flexes on the main
mm-hmm.
or the guy to get his paperwork, where he's like, "Oh, we've got these.
More of
Oh,
intimidates him, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
he said, never trust a smile. Realizes he's pulling one over on him, and he's like, oh, well, that's fine. We'll go ahead and settle this debt. We got all these corpses that we gotta drop off, right? And it's like, you say Colder? Oh, I was thinking of somebody else. Yeah. Oh,
or
Colder only owes me.
Qualder or something.
Yeah, yeah, like obvious BS. But yeah, yeah. That whole little side quest chain there, and just all of Leaf's Crossing, um, I got a good couple laughs out of.
Yeah, it kind of gave me that D&D feel where you finally
Mm,
reach a town and he's stocking up.
mm-hmm.
And yet again, okay, he does get set up. Something we kind of glanced over, but is now relevant. Futon, after he comes back to the Mist Village initially, says, "Hey, I found a treasury," and he has that whole like
Yes.
drooling. I felt like I said this, but I didn't say it. Anyway, treasury, and he gets set up yet again. But in the fact that he's got to set up a whole village, it's
Mm-hmm.
relevant and whatnot.
Mm,
A fees or whatever, or sorry.
mm-hmm.
So I guess progression wise, um, Scion almost goes into the inn, almost kills a goblin cook named Rat. They have that
Mm-hmm.
whole moment. Um, Rosie sees sees something in Richter and essentially says, "Hey, what are you really here for?" And then everything's. It seems like people are very high strung, but at the same time, it's kind of the knee jerk reaction. But then after you show your colors, they're a little more understanding.
Right.
So that all gets swept under the rug. We
Right.
go to the next village or the main town, right?
Yeah, the capital of law. Drawing a blank on what the kingdom overall is named, but the capital's name is Law. And yeah, that's pretty much where the rest of the book takes place, right? With a little bit of an exception at the end there. Um,
Yeah, I think it's the
when
longest we spend in one spot, but we accomplish
hmm
a lot.
hmm
We essentially get to sell our wares for the treasury, for killing all the goblins, for getting hooked up by the sprites with their pack animals,
hmm
um, for finding and disenchanting. No. Anyway, taking the evil out of the staff, which then he trades off. And yeah, okay, we get set up. We get um, our bag of holding, which is in every
Yes.
game, and you get
Yes.
the real world, like conversation with the with the girlfriend, where one of them is buying games and one of them is buying purses, and she says it's an investment, and yeah,
Oh
math's
yeah.
not the strong suit. Anyway, good chuckle. I enjoyed it. Um, then we get our map, which is awesome. Is very much video game-esque, kind of like Fog of
Mhm.
War
Mhm.
style, and we get a quest on a treasure map. The way he says it is just beautiful, and I wish I had the clip. I'm gonna try to get better about those. But he's pretty much like, "Oh, a quest on a hidden treasure map? You know, yes, please."
Eh,
What else do we pick up at that spot? I think we get a
oh.
couple intense arrows for like freeze
Mhm.
damage and armor
Mhm.
piercing and negation and whatnot.
Yeah, there's even like a confusion arrow that if you hit an opponent, it will attack other people or something like that.
Yeah,
He gets a lot of goodies there. And he ends up what was the merchant's name again?
a fees.
Afiz.
Yeah,
Uh,
or
eh,
yeah, sounds right.
yeah. Um, he ends up becoming a not really an ally, but pretty big player in the story because it's like his main merchant contact, right? Later on, he
I
does the negotiation to meet them on a regular basis for orders.
Yeah, he helps him out. Book one becomes even bigger throughout the stories, but I didn't say that. And
Uh,
then man, names escape me, and thank you for understanding. Go to another shop, of which we get the generic, hey, abilities can be only sold by the Mages Guild, and it's illegal to requisition them outside of it. And then you
hmm
get that whole like sleight of hand, not really
Money
interplay
talks.
where he, slides over the gem, and then you get that chuckle, and it's like, well, also don't put food on the table, so let's talk. And he gets set up with all his spells that he picks up. Yet again, I wish I had a spell list. They all come out to be amazing. I'm going to spitball here. And so we have when we were doing the dungeon dive and at the Mist Village, we got oh, not tame, but to take an enemy and make him an ally. Forget the name of it. And then we ended up getting a grease spell, which is where
hmm
the ice
mm Charm.
remembrance thing came from. Oh yeah, charm is
Thanks,
to
fun
take
guy.
over an enemy. Then we get our grease spell, which is application of power for interacting with the world. We've got our ice dagger, and then I feel like there's another one. Anyway, so now we've got a utility of spells. He also got a buff that we forgot about with his bow, because that's been his primary thing before really getting to Leaves Crossing.
Mm.
Um, and he got his focus ability, and then he also learned the explosive arrow technique. I forget the name.
Imbued shot. You mean from Scion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so a lot of cool abilities. Imbued shot. Now we, you know, collected or got ourselves set up where we're getting all our stuff together. I guess another big thing is he talks to Mama,
Mm.
and
She's a fun character.
yeah, and this is where I would recommend it to anybody, because even though there's a lot of a bromance and male humor, there's a lot of strong female characters. And
hmm
Mama essentially runs her own business, has a similar, genuine heart where she's trying to make sure her people get what they're worth, and
hmm
it runs a very smooth operation. Also gives us Randolphus, which you don't know, but oh my. Um, yeah, we get Randolphus, and I guess the biggest thing with that is he feels like there's a weight lifted off of him because he's been trying to organize all this, and
Yes.
we get to see a little bit of it when he talks to Mama, and he's like, "Oh, I need X, Y, and Z. I need all these people," and she's like, "Well, what about this? What about that? What about all this extra stuff? Like you're just playing at being a lord. You don't know jack or what you need." And then sets him up with Randolphus, and the weight whole lifted. The sprite's racial ability Victor learns, which is Oh yeah, and that's another big thing because the
Definitely was
ability,
a turning point in their relationship.
yeah, because it's supposed to be a race specific ability, and
Mhm.
so the fact that he's able to learn it kind of goes back to what the Hearth Mother was saying and how is his own man. You know, he's not the bad or the good of his whole race. He is his own person.
Mhm. Mhm. Um,
So this book is really a roadmap of today's political with character building. It's a little bit of everything. It does a lot of things well. It has a very righteous or pure-hearted main character where there's a lot of wrongs in the world which are somewhat relatable, and he wants to do justice. But then you get epic powers and level ups and gear and sounders, and you develop a whole town or village. So there's a lot of elements to it, but it has a lot of great morals and values.
yeah, yeah, I could definitely see some similarities and references to some of today's political issues, but there's just so many positive takeaways from this book. And I was even thinking about this last time I was listening to it. There are so many good role models for just like leaders and managers from this book, right? Like Richter, um, when he's addressing all these potential people who are going to come to his village, he doesn't claim to have all the answers, right? Like he makes it very clear that he is the master of the village, and but he's honest about he doesn't know what kind of challenges they're going to come up against, but that they're going to face them together, right? Like that he will stand with them through those struggles and trials. Go ahead, Pete.
Oh yeah, that was a big thing for me. There's another line in there where oh, he says something that I always say, and it's essentially like other people find problems and he finds solutions. So that was a
Hmm.
big like, oh, yep, it's all about perspective and looking at it that way. But then the moment you're talking about it was something that was it was hard. It was done well
Hmm.
in the manager role because there's a group of different races and he uses his analyze ability and he speaks to them in their native tongue. So it
Hmm.
shows like a willingness to be on their level, so to speak.
Hmm.
And then that was also kind of the moment where I was like, really? I thought you said the ability he had to hear it first, and they obviously didn't talk first, so it kind of ruined it a bit for me. But besides the point,
Uh,
then yeah, it's just a very empowered speech where it's like, hey, this isn't safe. But to be honest, where you're at, no place is safe. Like
hmm.
everything's going to be difficult. If you want it, you got to go get it. Which back to the whole introspection part I played earlier for when he is resolute after dying, um, builds all into that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to think of the wording for how he says it. No place in the world is safe, or I can't promise that it will be safe. No place is safe, but we will be together, and that just means a lot to me because in the industries I've worked in, outside hires, it's like yeah, they have expertise, but they don't know the operation the way someone who works up the ladder does. And
Mm,
having a manager who is a pencil pusher who can only see numbers is quite frustrating versus
hmm.
having a, from the I started from the bottom, now I'm here manager where they're willing
Uh,
to work through it and they've been there and they understand it and due to their understanding are able to jump in and help execute, as well
yeah,
as troubleshoot, critical think, and you know implement.
yeah, yeah. Um, as Fun Guy says, he's never afraid to admit when he's ignorant of issues, um, which is nice to see. But yeah, I think later on in the series, as we get to see some of these other characters grow and develop a little bit, we could really get in and analyze his management team for the Mist Village and how, their strengths coming together just build that epic team to help keep the Mist Village going in the right direction.
Yeah,
Um,
and not only just on, well, okay, this is further along. Please read the series. Not only that, but we get yet again the same thing for all sides. Because,
mhm.
kind of like I was saying, for solo play, civilization building, and guild or group, there's a lot of moments where even though he is a little OP or overpowered, he runs into a wall. And
Mhm.
he has his allies, pull his head out of his beep and pull his
Uh,
feet off the fire, and then there's that realization and revelation of, oh, I am all of this, I still need to dedicate and divide labor and have people help me. Anyway,
mhm.
so we're talking to these different races. We're about to attack Creamsicle Guy's house to save the elf maiden of Tarad.
Isabella?
That
Isabel?
sounds right, Isabella. And another kind of funky moment where he talks to them. They pretty much say, "Hey, we owe you for some of the other stuff you did. We need to help you with this." Um, and they teach him abilities. As we learn in this world, abilities are restricted, similar to the different races, where like you have to. It's essentially like having a patent. They're trying to monopolize it and have a patent on it, but
Mhm.
it's another. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place here. A thing the book does well is there's not a one size fits all. There's several
Mhm.
ways to learn an ability. Due to him becoming a master of a village on Nexus's powers of ley lines, he's able to teach Scion. Then from a book, he learns the tame or charm spell. And then from where we're at now, he's learning abilities from masters, from people in their field. And then kind of the same thing with the immune shot from Scion. You're able to motions and learn it, which anyway, so we learn all of these abilities, and they give them to him for free as a sense of, hey, this is a camaraderie moment. Pay our respects. This is what we can offer you. And it
Mhm.
kind of sets up in his mind and goes back to how he is just trying to be the best him he could be. And he's
Mhm.
put it in his mind that his village essentially will become Jedi's. That's the
Uh,
short version, but that he doesn't want to embody the same beliefs. He doesn't want to keep the lower class lower class. He wants to empower them through abilities and through the opportunities to better themselves, and full circle back around to we'll meet it together. So there's a lot of that.
I think Fungi pulled the quote. Is that the one there that you were
Oh,
looking for?
no place in the land is safe, but we, or when I grow with power, grow with me, and I will stand by you. Dedication, or you through dedication, ascendance. That sounds pretty close. But yeah, that's
It's definitely the same vibe, right?
yeah, and that's where he's just got a righteous soul, you know. And
I don't know if I would say he has a righteous soul. Like he certainly has some moral gray areas, but overall, um, he tries to do what's right.
okay, I guess I kind of wrote that off as the whole like what is good versus evil when he has the I forget why he gets introspective about it, but you know, Scion or the sprites are considered good,
Mm-hmm.
but they also have a shoot on sight. Trespassers will be shot, survivors will be shot again mentality. and then you've got the goblins who are negative, but
Right.
it's it's not as black and white. So I guess for me, I feel I guess righteous might not be the right word, but very headstrong in his beliefs.
He definitely
But
has a good moral compass. I'll give you
yeah,
that
yeah,
much.
okay.
I wouldn't consider him righteous, lawful good though. He,
No, I mean, even Zeus smites people.
well, Zeus is not the best example there because like Zeus is responsible for if Zeus could keep his libido tamed, there would be a
I
lot
guess that's
less of
true.
Greek mythology, so I wouldn't call him lawful good either. But anyway, back to the land. Um, yeah, so the final act there, did we talked through the fight and getting the chest, right? With the ledger and
Or
everything?
we glanced over it. Essentially,
Okay.
now where we've learned the abilities, we've trained up, we've gone into our hyperbolic time chamber, slight time hop, and also Scion's learned, alongside him what he can, cool
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Uh,
Ranked up.
yeah, we're all ranked up. We are about to we're about to infiltrate the. Or no, I guess we did skip over freeing the other non-human.
It's okay. It's okay. Let's get to the big climax.
Okay.
Um there at the end because that's where a lot comes together and I'd like to talk a bit about some of the characters we got set up as well. But for the sake of time, break down Creamsicle. Why you keep calling him Creamsicle?
So his house colors, so to speak, are like orange and white. And there's a line in the book where Richter feels as if he's a creamsicle because of the color scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Essentially, there's contacts. They get in. He has that whole like James Bond moment where he's like, "This is about to go down," and then the realization or the reality check where it's like, "Oh, this is some rich dude's party." It's not really a James Bond thing at all. Um, Comes through with his I want to say ploy of darkness, but that's not right. Sleep, troubled sleep. It comes through with his new spell that he's just learned, his troubled sleep spell. Knocks
Dark
out the
spell.
or yeah, it's a dark aligned spell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And, silently, you know, uses his poison darts. Not really. Takes out the guards. We are in with Isabella. Rod's, getting his good vibes, feels. We've done it.
Mm-hmm.
We end up finding out that one of our confidants or people in our party, words, is a thief, and they ransack the place. We get to see our dungeon ring, which skipped over item wise, come into play, where the thief is like, "Oh, I could pick this, but I don't have time," and he's like, "But wait, I'm overpowered," and he's dungeon ring. Gets even more jewels, even more stuff. Gets the signet ring from the Count, Duke, Creamsicle words. Um,
Okay.
and then he has to kind of, tell Tarad, like, hey, I know you're reunited with your love, but we gotta go. And at first, Tarad's, about to lose it, but then he's like, okay, you're right. They
Right.
get out just fine. Of course, Cyan couldn't come with them because if a other race showed up, it would have blown their cover.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, yeah, we did it. We did it. And then
We're at
Rowan,
the peak of this emotional roller coaster of yes, finally found Isabella, made it out alive, got more loot, and then
the leader of the Nightblade, which the section we skipped over, we ransacked their Okay, sorry. Section we skipped over. Rod was trying to smuggle um, non-humans out through a big underground gang, and they turned on him and said, "Hey, how about you pay us the ransom, and we'll, give them back or take them out." So now we've got to, go toe to toe with them. Why Richter and Scion get recruited for the extra muscle. We take out the initial hideout. Then our main Boo is not there, so we end up going into Creamskull's place. Anyway, so the leader of the Nightblades, who we just burned down his house and killed majority of his people earlier, shows up, and it turns out he's pretty OP too. He's pretty
Yeah.
BA. Our thief guy that we just met goes toe to toe with him, and it is straight out of DBZ, where they're just flashes of light predicting each other's moves. So that's going on. Meanwhile, Richter realizes that this is all just trying to stall because he has or I guess before that, while he's got his evil villain monologue where he's, telling them who they are and how they know and whatever. Richter realizes that other people are coming up. Application of power moment again. We get our grease spell. All these stealth figures. You can't stay stealth while you're, sitting on your face. They get, that. We get some mage battle. Another bubble shield thingy going on. Kind of wrecks Scion a bit. Then our thief guy who we're with dies.
Right.
Big emotional roller coaster for Tarad. He went from his love being stolen, trying to do something right for her, the Nightblades turning on him, to getting her back and feeling whole again. And then one of his good friends dies right in front of him. The mage kind of pulls an oopsie on the enemy team where he all the nubs are dying, more or less, or not dying, but not doing so hot, and he pulls off a necklace or something. More foreshadowing, I believe, for cool epic powers. And everybody in his party gets recalled or teleported elsewhere. Of course, the main guild leader is not happy at all, so he's screaming. And then we finally convince Tarad that, hey, he knows who you are. If he can figure it out, anybody else can. You're not safe. You need to come with us now. We'll get that bit of a bromance where, it all comes together and he becomes a companion. They carry Scion and... Oh, I'm sorry. I don't remember his name. The thief guy who got owned.
He was a relatively small character. Just important to show up, get us into Creamsicle, and then die, giving us all the feels.
He was a small character, but he was stronger than 95% of the other ones. Because Calder, because he was on the night or whatever, ended up killing random patrols of monsters, and everybody else is pretty low level. And then he was the only one who actually, I forget what gives him away, but he's like super quiet with his walk, or he does something specific, and Richter's like, so is it, okay to infer that you used to have a not so good, career choice? And he's like, oh, why, yes, I did. And they ransack the place. Anyway.
Rob Creamsicle.
Yep.
So, out of all the characters for this book, who do you feel was the MVP?
Well, I mean, I'd have to say Richter, just because he pulls everything through. But if we can't pick main character...
Yeah, not main character.
I would say you go, let me dial it in.
Fair enough. I think that in the ways of like most valuable player slash character in regards to kind of like nudging the storyline where it needs to go, really helping him, I'd say Calder. As much as he shook him down and worked some money out of him for a bribe and a little bit more to send him to a guy that he owed money to, he pretty much set him up on that path to get him what he needed for his village.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a good setup. And if didn't have Calder's interaction, we would have been spending a week or, DBZ terms powering up for
Uh,
10 episodes. And yeah, it definitely helped with the progression. We get to see a lot of people being like, well, how do you know about this? I'm obviously outspoken about these laws. So,
that last bit there was Tarad though, right? When he
well,
cornered them
yeah,
in the
but
alleys.
it was only because of
Calder,
Calder's,
sending them to the
giving
Whistling
him
Hen.
the heads up, sending him to the
hmm
Whistling Hen, and
hmm
then Rosie recommending to Rod.
The Laughing Imp.
Yeah, sounds.
Sounds right.
And then, yeah, that whole thing. So, if I had to pick an MVP solely based off of book one, if I,
You're-
it's hard because I know other books. I
Uh,
want to say names, and like for the majority of the book, the only people we see are Richter and Scion.
yeah. Well, they're in everything, but there's some other big key characters. I think the Hearth Mother did some work. Um, Tarad obviously did some work. Um, Scion's not technically a main character, or not the main character,
Yeah,
but close enough, right? Um,
I guess I would have to say Mama because it was one of those surreal moments that happen so often in life where we're going along, we think we have all our eggs in our basket,
mhm.
and it turns out that like you don't realize you also have a monkey on your back, and
Uh,
it's the final straw for the camel, and all these other building factors. I'm sorry, I can't remember names, but I can abstract the out a bit. And
uh,
then anyway, so just the whole interplay with Mama, where she is pretty much like, "Hey, you know why they call me this? Because I take care of my own, and
mhm,
it's a motherly thing." And
mhm.
then the fact that they have that whole interplay where she just like right off the bat dresses him down and is like, you know, I only deal with people I know. If I don't know you, you're not worth my time. I only deal with recommendations, this, that, and the other.
Right,
And then,
right.
due to you not having this and sowing discord, and anyway, it's a great thing. Wish I had the quote. Wish I had the audio format stuff. And then he sits there and waits all day, and she's got all these connections, and she's able to infer all of this. I
Mhm.
don't know. It's a good moral lesson bit, and I'm sorry I cheated. And further in the series, oh man, yeah. Anyway, so the monkey on the back bit with Randolphus, and just the relief of I don't know how to raise a village. I've never done anything like this. I think I know
Yes,
what I need, and
yes.
she comes from a place of power, but not really a place of power in the other sense, and just
Just
figures
setting
it
us up
out.
with Randy for later on, not to get too far ahead, but yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm with you there. Um, yeah. What else you got, or is it time to
Transition out. Uh,
yeah.
Let me think. I feel it was all good stuff. Thank you for bearing with us for the technical difficulties. I will be doing more breaking of stuff, and I
Always.
will put it at 1x speed for the future.
For
Um,
you mere mortals.
it's yeah. You'd be surprised how many speed controls there are on things. Like literally everything except for IRL, I can
You
speed
know,
control.
while we're just griping about speed controls or lack thereof, why doesn't Facebook have a speed control for watching videos? Every other major platform does, but when you watch it on Facebook, you have to do 1x.
Yeah,
Just throwing that out there.
I think it.
Facebook, get it together.
I think it's a whole keep you here ploy because they also broke all the
Mm,
YouTube links where if you are on mobile and you click a link, it reverts to the old YouTube and it shows it in desktop
mm,
version on your
mm.
phone. And it's just kind of like, WT, are you doing?
Uh,
But if you put it native on their platform, so you spend more time with them, it plays just fine, minus speed.
okay, okay. Back on point though.
Uh,
We like to break stuff. We
oh,
appreciate
yeah.
everyone showing up to hang out with us. Um,
And
Same
if
time. Oh, go ahead.
and if you want another top tier, top shelf recommendation, of which we will be here Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern. The dates escape me. 21st, June 21st. Mistborn, Book 1 by Brandon Sanderson. I don't have the author or the narrator in front of me.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Come spend the end of your Father's Day with two geeky dads as we talk about Mistborn, the Final Empire, the start of an epic, epic trilogy of trilogies.
yes. And yeah, I guess brief little snippet about it. It has not as many like super relatable factors, but it definitely has a lot of, I guess, management style tip things that don't come through the same.
I was about to say, I think there's a lot of good takeaways from that book too, which will be fun to
Yeah.
get into.
Yep. Alrighty. Thank you. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern for the foreseeable. Sure.
Bye.
Bye.